I had always heard stories about crazy exes and laughed at them, but when I hear one now, I get uncomfortable because I can relate to it. It all started a few years ago when I decided to end things with my girlfriend. We had been together for a long time, but things just weren't working out anymore. I thought it was best for both of us to move on. At first, she didn't take the breakup well. She would call me constantly, show up unannounced at my apartment, and even send me long, desperate messages begging me to take her back. I tried to be understanding and gentle with her, but nothing seemed to get through to her. Eventually, I met someone new. She was sweet, kind, and everything I could have hoped for in a partner. We started dating, and for a while, everything seemed perfect. But my ex didn't see it that way. One night, my new girlfriend and I were out on a date. We were driving along a winding road, enjoying each other's company, when suddenly, I saw headlights in my rearview mirror. At first, I didn't think much of it, but then the car behind us started getting closer and closer, swerving dangerously close to our bumper. I panicked and tried to speed up, but the other car matched our pace, always staying right behind us. My heart raced as I realized what was happening. It was my ex-girlfriend. She was following us, trying to run us off the road. I couldn't believe it. How could she be so obsessed, so desperate, that she would resort to something like this? I tried to keep my composure, focusing on the road ahead as I navigated the treacherous curves. But my ex was relentless. Her car inching closer and closer with each passing second. Suddenly, she made her move. Her car managed to get ahead of mine, and with a screech of tires, she swerved into our lane, forcing me to swerve off the road to avoid a collision. My heart was pounding in my chest as I fought to regain control of the car, the sound of my girlfriend's terrified screams echoing in my ears. But by some miracle, I managed to keep the car on the road. Looking over my shoulder, I saw that her vehicle was no longer stationary. I breathed a sigh of relief as we managed to speed away from my crazed ex, leaving her behind in a cloud of dust. I looked in my rearview mirror one last time, seeing her vehicle disappear from view as we fled into the night. The next day, I would learn that my ex-girlfriend's car had driven off a nearby cliff. Her lifeless body was still strapped into the driver's seat. It was a tragic accident, they said, a result of her reckless driving in her blind pursuit of us. As I think back on that night, I can't help but feel a sense of sadness for my ex-girlfriend. Despite everything that had happened between us, she didn't deserve such a fate. But perhaps it was a harsh reminder of the consequences of obsession and jealousy, a lesson that she learned too late. But then I look at my wife and our beautiful son, and I know that I made the right choice. I may have escaped my crazy ex, but I found something far more precious in the process. Hey guys. Please consider subscribing if you want more videos from us here at Frightfest Factory. Let's get back into it. Crazy exes, we all have them, right? In my 30s, I wasn't exactly the most faithful guy. And well, I paid a hefty price for it. But the real story starts with Jasmine, my crazy ex-girlfriend, a woman with a temper like a ticking time bomb. We had been dating for 3 years at that time. We had our fair share of ups and downs like all couples do, but I never could have imagined how low things were about to go. It all began when she caught me cheating. The look in her eyes was like ice. Cold and unforgiving. She didn't scream or cry, she just stood there, a silent fury burning behind her gaze. I knew then that I had messed up big time. But instead of storming out like I expected her to, she stayed. And that's when things got really crazy. The first act of her madness came a few days later. I woke up to find my car parked outside, tires slashed and windows smashed. She had left a note, just a single word scrawled across the page in angry letters. Cheater. I tried to brush it off and convince myself that it was just a one-time thing, a momentary lapse in judgment on her part. But deep down, I knew better. That was the moment I should have ended our relationship. The second act came soon after. She started sending threatening messages. Not just to me, but to my friends and family too. She accused them of turning me against her. It was like she was unraveling before my eyes, her sanity slipping away like grains of sand through clenched fists. And then came the night I'll never forget. The final act. I was driving back home after a long day at the office when I saw it. Smoke filled up the night sky, a dark plume against the stars. My heart stopped as I realized what was happening. My house was on fire. I pulled up to my street, my heart stuck in my throat as I saw the flames licking at what used to be my home. Panic surged through me, and I stumbled out of the car, the scent of smoke filling my lungs. I yelled for help, but it was too late. Everything I owned, everything I loved, gone in an instant. I was in so much shock that I could just stand there and watch the fiery scene unfold in front of me. The neighbors phoned the fire department as soon as they saw the flames, and they arrived minutes after, extinguishing the flames. Eventually, the authorities pieced together what had happened. Traces of accelerant were found at the scene. My first thought was Jasmine, and if she might have had something to do with it. I kept trying to phone her, but her cell phone was off. My suspicions were confirmed when she was arrested soon after and charged with arson. They found her hiding out in a rundown motel, a crazed look in her eyes, a lighter clutched in her hand. She didn't put up a fight, didn't even try to deny what she had done. In court she just stared at me with those cold, dead eyes, a twisted smile playing at the corners of her lips. And now here I am, years later, reflecting back on that night with a mixture of horror and disbelief. It's a story I'll never forget. A cautionary tale of the dangers of betrayal and the consequences of playing with fire. My crazy ex may be behind bars now, but she is still on my mind. Most days I feel guilty for what I had done and for pushing her down the path she took. Then again, if she was capable of burning my house down, who knows what else she could have done and what could have happened to me. When I first met him, I never could have imagined that I'd be the protagonist of a nightmare story. Yet, here I am, still trying to piece together the horror that unfolded when my ex-boyfriend became my worst nightmare. Jack and I met in a coffee shop. They mistakenly messed up our orders and we ended up chatting. He was charming and good-looking and around my age. Jack and I kept in contact and started dating after a few weeks. As time went on, I realized we weren't meant to be together. We had different goals in life and relationships, so I knew eventually that we wouldn't work out. Breaking up with him was the hardest thing I had ever done. Little did I know, it was just the beginning of my nightmare. At first, Jack seemed to take the breakup well. He assured me that he understood and respected my decision. But soon, his calls and messages became more frequent and more desperate. He begged me to reconsider, to give him another chance. I tried to let him down gently, but Jack wouldn't accept it. His obsession with me escalated quickly. He started showing up at my workplace, my home, and even my favorite coffee shop. I felt like I was being watched constantly, like his eyes were always on me, even when he wasn't there. One night, as I was leaving work and walking towards my car, I heard footsteps running towards me. I spun around, just in time to see Jack grab me. His face was expressionless and his eyes blank. He dragged me to the car next to mine and shoved me in the back. Before I could even scream, he had me tied up and gagged, driving to God knows where. Panic coursed through my veins as I struggled against the ropes, but it was no use. I was at his mercy. He took me to a secluded cabin somewhere deep in the woods, far away from civilization. There, he locked me in a small room with only a mattress on the floor and a single dim light bulb hanging from the ceiling. Days turned into weeks as I started to lose hope in that suffocating darkness, wondering if I would ever see the sun again. Jack would come to visit me every other day, his eyes filled with a mix of love and madness. He brought me food and magazines, and the occasional bucket of warm water so I could wash myself. He would rant and rave about how we were meant to be together, how he couldn't live without me. I started to realize that the only way out of this nightmare was to play along. To make him believe that I still loved him. So I pretended. I pretended to laugh at his jokes, to smile at his touch, to whisper sweet nothings in his ear. And slowly, ever so slowly, I began to gain his trust. He started to loosen the ropes, to let his guard down just a little bit more each day. He eventually even stopped locking the door at night when he slept over, and I knew that would be my chance of escaping. After a couple of days or so, Jack fell asleep and I saw my chance. With trembling hands, I untied the ropes and crept out of the room, careful not to make a sound. Every creak of the floorboard sent shivers down my spine, but I pushed through the fear, driven by the desperate need to escape. As I reached the door, my heart pounding in my chest, I heard Jack stir behind me. I froze, holding my breath, praying that he wouldn't wake up. I slowly turned my head to look behind my shoulder, and to my relief, Jack was still asleep. I turned the door knob and I slipped out into the cold night air. Running through the woods, my feet pounding against the forest floor, I felt a surge of adrenaline coursing through my veins. I didn't know where I was or where I was going, but freedom was within reach just beyond the trees. And as the first rays of dawn broke through the darkness, I emerged from the woods, battered and bruised but alive. I ran to the road and saw a truck stop nearby. With a sense of relief, I ran as fast as my legs would carry me. The authorities eventually caught up with Jack. He was found holed up in a remote cabin in the mountains, ranting and raving about our supposed love. They say he's now serving a long sentence in a maximum security prison where he can no longer harm anyone else. It's a small comfort knowing that he's locked away where he can't hurt me or anyone else, but the memories of those terrifying days will always stay with me.